Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Machan Le'Ra Online Smicha. As we are about to celebrate the great Yom Tov of بعומر, I would like to share with you some, perhaps 3 lessons that you can learn from the life and the teachings of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. And why, from all the Tanoim and the Ma'iraim, there are many answers given to this question. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai's yahrzeit became a day of celebration that Klal Yisrael celebrates each in his own way. So there are 3 lessons that perhaps we could learn from the life of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Besides the famous story of the going into the Meira and how he lived the life in Mesiras Nefesh, there are some beautiful other points. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, as the well-known statement is, Somehow, every Yid feels connected to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Whatever level of a Yid he somehow feels connected. And perhaps this is one of the teachings that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai made every Yid feel important enough to want to connect. There's a din in Hilchos Shabbos, in Masechah Shabbos, Perek Yudalid, Mishnah Dalid. And over there it talks about the Hilchos Refuah on Shabbos. What kind of refuah you're allowed to take on Shabbos? What kind of refuah you have to withhold? And then the Mishnah goes on to speak about smearing different things on your body on Shabbos. When a person has a stomachache, a headache, whatever it is. So the Mishnah says, "Hachoshnes b'masnav." If somebody has a pain, lo yosich yain v'chaymetz. He should not smear wine or vinegar, because those are expensive items. Those are not items that are usually used for smearing. They're used for drinking or for other usage. So when you use those on Shabbos, it's obvious that you're doing a refuah. And refuah is not allowed on Shabbos. Avol sachu es hashemen. But you're allowed to smear oil because oil, even healthy people, even people who are not sick, smear oil on themselves, so it doesn't look like a refuah. However, the loy shemen vered, that oil that comes from a flower, from a rose, because since that is expensive, and it's only used for a refuah. So if a person does that on Shabbos, he is doing it obviously for a refuah. However, b'nei malachim, if this person is from the royal family, for them, they would smear this fancy oil, these rose oil, even during the week. For them, sachin shemen vered al makesem, they could smear that even on Shabbos. Okay? Comes Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon says, why are they different? They're royal? Kol Yisrael b'nei malachim. Every Yid is considered a royal from the royal family. Every Yid is the son of a king, a prince, and if in the palace, on a daily routine, they would smear this expensive oil, a regular Yid could use this on Shabbos, even if he's doing it for refuah, because it doesn't look like he's doing a refuah. It looks like it's a daily routine. And la halacha, the Gemara says, in this particular halacha, the Gemara says that if this shemen vered is, you could get it easily, and people use it, it's mutter. And if not. And it becomes a halacha, because it becomes a question, because the Bartanura over here says we don't paskin like Reb Shimon, and the Rambam does paskin, so it depends if this is available. Reb Shimon over here tells us that every Yid, it's not only the special one, or the rich one, or the learned one. This halacha was, according to Reb Shimon, it's for every Yid. You are a prince. You are a ben melech. When a person gets that feeling within him, obviously it excites him. Obviously it motivates him to become better. So that's the first point that we see that Reb Shimon gave chayes to every Yid, wherever, whenever. And then we have the famous other halachas that Reb Shimon teaches us. Reb Shimon, we find, always went basar hamachshava. Sometimes a person does something, but that wasn't his intention. What did he really want to do? And we find in many halachas, in Hilchos Shabbos, in Hilchos Nezikin, if a person accidentally killed the wrong person, even though he did a terrible act, but if he wanted to kill A and he kills B, Rab Shimon says you can't blame him. The machshava, what he was thinking is what his feelings were. We find in general, Rab Shimon says, Derish in time of the Krah. Every time there's a mitzvah, we have to dig deep and understand what the depth, what's the reason behind it. So Rab Shimon tells you, the action is good or bad, but really where's the neshama, where's your life, where's your motivation? So Rab Shimon digs, and that's what the Razei Torah, that's why Rab Shimon was the one that revealed the hidden secrets of the Torah, because he's not only what you see, he digs deeper, and he tells you what you have hidden, the powers that you have within you. Now, there's the third thing I want to mention, which is basically a very fascinating question that's brought in a sefer. There was a person that wrote a sefer a couple hundred years ago, and the name of the sefer was Ben Yechoy. It's a controversial sefer, but it's a controversial mechaber, but it's quoted in many places. And he says a very fascinating theory. He says there's a question. We find that Rab Shimon is mentioned many, many times in Gemara. And hundreds of thousands of times there's halacha mentioned Rab Shimon. But many, many times, most of the times it's mentioned Rab Shimon. A few times it's mentioned Rab Shimon ben Yechoy. We have in Pirkei Avos even Rab Shimon ben Yechoy. Now, Rab Shimon ben Yechoy, everybody knows his greatness in Torah. Not only his greatness in Torah, Chazal tell us that for every question Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair asked, Rabbi Shimon ben Yechoy gave him 24 answers. The Gemara in Sukkah says, Sukkah Daf Mem Hey Amud Beis says, Rabbi Shimon ben Yechoy says, Ra'isi b'nei Ali, I saw great people, v'hem muatim, and there are very few, and the only ones who he sees is maybe him and his son. In other words, he's a shoulder above everybody else. The Gemara tells us a story when he came out of the cave, anywhere he looked, it became a gal shalatzam, a pile of bones. In the time of Rabbi Shimon ben Yechoy, he was a great tzaddik, a rainbow, loinir sa keshes. We're talking about the holy of the holy, and we're talking about the most learned person. Yet, at the same time, we find a fascinating thing. We find that every time, or most of the times, Rabbi Shimon ben Yechoy is in a machlokes with somebody, the halacha is usually passing like his opponent. Chazal say, Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yosi, halacha Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The Marshal in Shilas Teshuvah Siman Tzadik Ches goes as far as saying, I hold so and so about a certain halacha. Even if Rabbi Shimon would stand up and come to me and scream against me and say the minig is different, I wouldn't listen to him. Why not? Says the Marshal, Ki beroiv dvarov ein halacha kamoisei. We're talking about Rabbi Shimon ben Yechoy. I just mentioned all the great things, the lofty levels he's achieved. How is it that we don't pass him like him? He's almost always on the losing end. So this mechaber makes a chiluk. He says, we said a minute ago that in the Chazal he's mentioned many times, most of the times as Rab Shimon, sometimes as Rab Shimon ben Yechoy. These are two stages in his life. There's Rab Shimon and there's Rab Shimon ben Yechoy. And we find an example that Rab Shimon went into the cave to hide from the Romans. The Gemara uses the lashon nichnas al Mayra. It says he went into the Mayra. Rab Shimon went into the Mayra. The moment he comes out of the Mayra, when the Gemara says the story, and he's about to go out, and somebody has to go report to him the news that the Roman king, the Roman emperor died. It says, doesn't use the word anymore, the title of Shimon says, Man ludei l'bar Yechoy. Why should we, who's going to be the one to tell Bar Yechoy that the emperor died? Why the switch? And the answer is, or we find it after he came out, Tir ben Yechoy beis hakvaris. Shimon ben Yechoy was able to go around and say where the corpses are buried and where it's Torah and where it's Tamid. The name title switched. Rabbi Akiva before the Rab Shimon before the Mayra, Rab Shimon ben Yechoy or ben Yechoy after the Mayra. Something happened during that period of time where he upgraded and he reached such high levels, these high levels that we're talking about, and the Gili of Seidei HaTorah all came to him during the Myra, that everything switched. That we learned that Rab Shimon has Ein Halacha Rab Shimon, Rab Yosi, Rab Yehuda. That's when he's Rab Shimon. Anything that he says when he reached the level of Rab Shimon by Yechai, then of course he is no one greater. There's a fascinating Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. In Rosh Hashanah, Daf Daled Amud Aleph, there's a Gemara that says a halacha that Rab Shimon says, and afterwards the Gemara has a little conversation about it, and the Gemara says, "V'chein hoya Rab Shimon b'Yechai yomer." Before you called him Rab Shimon, and a minute later, you about the same topic, you say, "Rab Shimon b'Yechai used to say." Rabbi Akiva Eger and Gilyon Ashas asked this question. However, it could be that he said this originally, and then when he came out and repeated, now it reached the next level, the level of the Kedusha and the high level of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai.